let's begin. We have limit as x approaches 0 from the right of 1 over 3x. So the idea here is if I pick x to be a very small positive number, like for example 0.001 or 0.001, etc., I get a positive number over a small positive number. In this case, I know my answer is going to be positive because positive divided by positive is positive, and a number over a really small number will go to infinity. So my limit is just positive infinity. And I can see this if I were to graph y equals 1 over 3x. So it'll look something like this. I approach this from the right, so 0 going to the right of 0. And I see that my graph is going to positive infinity. So my limit here is positive infinity. Let's look at what happens if I approach it from the left. So if I have limit as x approaches 0 from the left of 5 over 2x, this is really having x being a really small negative number like 0.001 or negative 0.0001, etc. And this is just a positive number over a small negative number. And we know positive divided by negative is just going to be negative. And a number divided by a small number will just approach infinity. So my limit here is negative infinity. And looking at the graph, it's going to be something like this. And if we're approaching 0 from the left, so we'll be going down the graph here, and we also see that's going down to negative infinity. Now what happens if the denominator is not x? What if we have limit as x approaches 2 from the left of 3 over x minus 2? Here I know that if I plug in 2, I get 3 over 0. So that's not going to work. Let's think about plugging a number really close to 2, but from the left. So that would be like 1.99 or 1.9999, etc. What I get is a positive number, so we'll just say positive over. Now think of it like 1.99 minus 2. That's going to be negative, right? Because it's to the left of 2. And 1.999 minus 2 is small. And as I get 1.99999 minus 2, that's also small. So it's getting smaller and smaller as the further out you go, and the closer you get to 2. So this will be a small number. Right? And a positive divided by negative is a negative, and a number divided by a really small number will just be infinity. So my limit here is negative infinity. And again, if you were to graph this, your vertical asymptote now is shifted 2 units here. Right, so you'll have something like that. And so if you're going 2 from the left, you know you're going down this direction to negative infinity. Okay. Next, if we have limit as x approaches 3 from the right of 1 over x minus 3. Again, here you want 3 to be to the right of, you want x to be to the right of 3, so I can think of it like x is 3.001, 3.00001, etc. What you end up having is a positive number at the top, and because the x that we choose is greater than 3, we're also going to get a positive number in the denominator. But this time it's going to be a small number, right? It's going to be very small. So I know my answer is going to be positive, right? Because a positive divided by positive is positive. And a number divided by a small number will just be infinity. So the limit here would approach positive infinity. And we can see it by the graph. We have a vertical asymptote at 3. And we have something like that. And if I'm approaching 3 from the right, we go along this graph here, and you know it's going to positive infinity. Okay. Next, I have limit as x approaches negative 8 from the right. It's 2x over x plus 8. So here I'm going from the right, so to the right of negative 8. So this is a little tricky because it's negative. So if you're having trouble, to the right of it, so pick a number to the right of negative 8, will be like negative 7.99 or negative 7.999, etc. So that's the x value that we're considering, so any of these x values. So x here is negative, so 2x will also be negative. So we have a negative number at the top. And a number to the right of negative 8, so let's say negative 7.99 plus 8, that's going to be positive. So that's a positive number. And the closer we get to 8 from the right, we get smaller and smaller. So that will just be a small number. And we know that a negative divided by a positive will give us a negative. And a number divided by a very, very, very small number will approach infinity. So the limit here is negative infinity. And the graph, it's a bit complicated because of the x here. But really, it's the same concept that we've been working with the last couple problems. So the graphing is really not necessary for this. Looking at a similar one, I have limit as x approaches negative 5 from the left of 3x over 2x plus 10. I know if I plug in negative 5 here, we get a 0 at the denominator. So I'm going to think about picking numbers to the right of negative 5. And if you're not sure what is to the right of it, we know that if we select, let's say, negative 4.99 or negative 4.999, etc. What happens is, we know x is negative, so 3x is also going to be negative. And 2x plus 10, so think of this as 2 times x plus 5, right? So if I'm picking numbers to the right of negative 5, that means it's greater than negative 5. So the x plus 5 is just going to be positive. So that will just be a positive number. And now when I do x plus 5, as x gets closer and closer to negative 5, it's going to get really, really small. So the difference there is going to get really, really small. So a negative divided by a positive is a negative, and a number divided by a very, very, very small number will approach infinity. So my limit here goes to negative infinity. So what happens if we have a square in the denominator? So if you have x approaching 7, a 4 over x minus 7 squared. Here I don't really care about the sign because the square is going to make it positive. So I'm going to be looking at 7 going from both directions. So you can think of, approaching 7 from the left and 7 from the right. But it doesn't really matter because I'm going to be looking at the difference, right? This x minus 7 is the difference. And you're taking the difference and squaring it. So the difference could be positive or negative. I don't care, because I'm going to be squaring it. It's going to be the same thing. So regardless, these two cases, we know that 7 from the left and 7 to the right are going to be the same. So as I get closer and closer to 7 from either direction, I know this is going to get closer and closer to 0. So I'll end up having 4 over a positive number because of the square, and it's going to be very, very small as I get closer to 7. So we know this is going to be positive, and a number over a really small number will just approach infinity. So my limit here is just infinity.